Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Tuesday, July 6th, 2021. And our top story today, a successful Tokyo Games will boost tourism in Japan and striving for education, science, and technology innovation. Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Dr. Kenji Chida. He's an independent researcher based in Okayama, Japan, focusing on education and tourism. Kenji, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program again this morning.
Great to see you, Jeff, and thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. So first thing I want to do, let's get the latest update on the Tokyo Games, which are slated to start very soon. Are we going to have visitors? Are we going to have people, spectators coming to the events?
Well, the spectators will be Japanese nationals, and some will be allowed, as far as I know right now, up to 10,000 per venue. So quite a small number when you think of the size of the venues. And but there is some, I guess, backlash against that. There's some ministers who are connected to the coronavirus, you could say, pandemic strike force, who are opposed to having any spectators at all. So there's still some back and forth about that, but I think the 10,000 will stand.
Okay.
No foreign.
Let's kind of break this down to tourism, because tourism is a big part of the Japanese economy. And you've got a lot of people that come from not only domestically travel in and around Japan, but also people internationally. How has the tourism industry done pre, during, and maybe post-pandemic, even though you're still kind of in the throes of it?
Right. Well, I mean, before the pandemic, it was booming. So you're talking about up to 2019, the end of 2019, it was record numbers for tourists. I think there were about 30 million foreign visitors to Japan in 2019, which was, I think, a record. And the government was very optimistic about increasing that number, and basically in Asia competing with Thailand, for example, with their tourism. They're historically been the leaders of Asian tourism. So it looked promising. And then, of course, the pandemic struck. It went from 2019, 30 million to practically zero in 2020. And as of 2021 now, still the borders are closed to foreign tourists. So it doesn't look good. It's not looking good for tourism, the entire industry right now.
And so when we focus on the games, I mean, really, if you think about it, pre-pandemic or before, if this had never happened, hosting the Olympics, really a big deal for a country, a city like Tokyo, resulting in lots of retail, lots of visitation, seeing the historical sites. I mean, there's so much to do in Japan. Let's talk about what a successful Tokyo Games could be. And what is, I would define success as it gets off without a hitch. There's not a lot of outbreak in terms of coronavirus, and things go off really well, where you have 10,000 nationals who are participating. But what does that mean longer term to the tourism industry in Japan?
Well, like you said, if the pandemic had never happened, it would have been what everyone expected, which would have been a boom for everybody in practically all the 47 prefectures to get the tourism offshoot of the Tokyo traffic. But because of the pandemic, all that's really left as far as business opportunities come through sponsorships and, you could say, the broadcasting of the Olympic Games around the world. So Japanese companies still have a chance to make a lot of money through advertising and through basically cross-selling products, international products and domestic products in Japan and around the world through the Olympic Games, which will be highly watched, I imagine. So there's still that. And actually, that's what is the driving force behind, I think, Japan really not wanting the games to be canceled. And of course, the IOC doesn't want to cancel them either, because all that money, those billions of dollars, are on the line. If they're canceled, there will be heavy penalties to pay, maybe to the IOC, but also with these companies that have already invested in the Olympics.
Yeah, and I think about, I think about going forward, and let's talk about 2022, because anytime that you host the Olympics, you're building infrastructure, whether that is new facilities that right now will be housing the athletes, but could be turned around to do other things in the community. Building the infrastructure for mass transit to move people around to the different facilities. This sets up Japan, like it would any country, for a really positive 2022, given that vaccines have been, it looks like have been distributed or being distributed. People will be vaccinated. So 2022, I'm pretty bullish on Japan, even though I'm not there.
Well, I am sort of the kind of the opposite direction. I'm kind of pessimistic because I don't see any government plan or protocol to allow foreign tourism to restart. I don't see it on the horizon. They're only really concerned about the Olympics going off well right now, as far as I can see. I don't see any sort of guidelines to restart tourism in Japan. International visitors coming in. They haven't really talked. They're really focusing on trying to get Japanese population or Japanese residents vaccinated, but there's no real talk of opening the country up and what the timetable will be. So I don't think 2022 would be so possible. And the business circles, when I was still working closely with some travel companies, my superiors told me they were looking at 2024 to spring back. I think 2022 may be still too early.
Yeah, I mean, you're the expert. Mine's just based on anecdotal or lack of anecdotal evidence. I guess last question here. I mean, the distribution of vaccines seems to be going fairly well. I know that there's anticipation. I think there were some challenges rolling it out. How has the virus been stymied, slowed down? Have rates started to tick back down given the vaccinations?
Yeah, they have actually all across the country. Although Tokyo is still a hotspot, they still have 400 to 500 new cases per day. So I think Tokyo is actually still under some type of quasi quarantine in a way, or a state of emergency. But the other parts of the country are pretty much stabilized. The problem with the vaccine is that there's not enough of it. And still, as far as I know, as of today, there's only about 8% of the population has been vaccinated. So that's a very small number, obviously. And young people, for the most part, are hesitant to be vaccinated. If you read articles about it, it's really mostly they're talking about plans or projections for vaccination. They don't have the vaccine, the quantities of vaccine, the doses to actually carry it out yet. And actually, you see now that in companies, because they're trying to do a rollout in companies and universities, you see that they've had to push back the schedule for vaccinations from July to August, for example. So that just shows you that it's not really logistically possible to get the vaccine in time for the Olympics or really anything else.
Yeah. Well, certainly seems like things are a little bit slower. Same challenges we have here in the States and probably in other parts of the world as well. Kenji, I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about cutting edge education, innovation, and science in Japan. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. we want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Dr. Kenji Chida. He's an independent researcher focused on tourism and education. Kenji, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Hey, no problem. My pleasure.
Yeah, it's great. And so we're going to go from tourism. Let's talk about education.
Okay.
A lot of headwinds, just like in Japan, just like in other countries. There's an aging population, maybe the impact, the mental health impact of the pandemic. Can you give us a baseline of how education is perceived in the Japanese culture, community, and what it's like there?
Well, it's of course it's very important, and it goes back to, I think, Confucianism actually, because a lot of the basis of education, the foundation of it, kind of seeped in from China, and it's sort of the idea of studying to improve yourself, to improve your position in society. It's ancient here, and it still exists pretty much, I think, unchanged, really. The exam system is a good, which is often talked about in the media. That is a good example of how that persists. The way exams are administered, from university to civil service or whatever it may be, it's a very rigid system, but people all pretty much buy into it. One Japanese educator explained to me that the basis of the Japanese education system is that anyone should be able to, no matter what your social status, background, anyone should be able to rise up through the education system, the public education system, and even if you're from a very maybe a poor family or something like that, you should still have a chance to go to Tokyo University, which is the most prestigious university in the country.
Yeah. So, but are there headwinds? I mean, I mentioned kind of in the intro, or has Japan maybe fallen behind a little bit when it comes to being an innovator? I mean, you and I both grew up in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
We remember how Japan was ahead in building cars, manufacturing, televisions. And I think, so why don't you answer that question, and I'm going to piggyback on the impact of the pandemic, all that. But first, where does Japanese education stand today?
Yeah, they're not really. I wouldn't say there are any headwinds. I wouldn't say. I also wouldn't say that Japan is particularly behind. I think it's stagnant. one of the things the pandemic showed was that the country is not as IT connected as other countries that are considered developed. Maybe it's caught up by now, but it's still somewhat behind, say, countries like the United States or maybe even South Korea, for example. But I think that kind of technology is not so difficult to catch up with. The kind of secret of Japan is that advanced technology, that's part of business, it's part of a kind of a marketing tool, but there's all kinds of technology that's used in the country. So what you see in Tokyo, you would not necessarily see in a place like Okayama, as far as technological advances. High-speed trains pass through the country, but the infrastructure, say in Tokyo, is completely different from, say, a place like Okayama or other cities, even like Hiroshima or something, completely different. So I think that's one of the things that shocks people. But I would say, yeah, there are no real headwinds. Japan is still, I think, education-wise, looking for what the next trend will be, the next Silicon Valley type of movement. They're looking for that, and that's one of the reasons I think they've actually just changed the immigration system to allow more foreign technological experts into the country, what they call technicians or people with special skills into the country to sort of jumpstart that.
Yeah, and what about foreign competition? I mean, China, right nearby,
Right.
other parts of Asia, where there is innovation hotbed. I mean,
Right.
Look, we've all gone through the pandemic, some at different points of time, but can Japan, under its current educational system, develop young professionals, young people to help continue to meet the needs technologically, become more innovative, do some of the things that we need in science?
I think so, but it's going to be in collaboration with China or countries like you just mentioned. So in universities, for example, they recruit heavily from countries abroad. You'll see they'll have young scientists studying in graduate school and undergraduate programs, bringing them in, encouraging them to stay in Japan, not just study and go back home, to stay and contribute to this society. And this is one of the reasons why they made reforms to the immigration system to create visas that will allow people to stay and actually smooth the path to permanent residence and things like that, to attract people, the talent from abroad. And in fact, attract workers from places like China. I've known plenty of Chinese scientists who've come to Japan and work in companies in career jobs. So it's not just going to be homegrown anymore. It's going to be getting foreign talent as part of it, and that will spur competition with local Japanese students and make them better, I think.
Yeah, well, really good point. And I think that parity, that creates parity and creates, as you said, the competition to do better, both educationally, but also innovate. And, it's interesting, just I'll leave you with this and get your comment on it. Here in the States, we've got 50 states, and much of the same, I was talking with the treasurer of Delaware recently, and she wanted to do something similar where if you educate people in Delaware, why not keep people in Delaware to work for Delaware companies and work within the community? And so the same thing kind of exists here in the United States, and I would think probably exists in other parts of the world, right? If you're doing the education, you're bringing people into your culture, whether it's the U.S. or China or Japan, it makes sense to keep them there if you can.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, that wasn't that type of thinking in Japan. There was always, okay, of course, when you finish, you're going to go back to your home country and do what you're going to do there. But I think they realized that was a waste of resources and investment. And because a lot of students, not all of them, but many students who come from abroad to Japan receive government assistance, so some type of scholarship from the Japanese government. So, that's an investment. I mean, of course, it was meant to build goodwill between two countries, but in the end, if you can encourage a few of those students to stay and be productive in Japan, why not? And I think that's the way that the thinking started to change. Probably by the end of the 90s, it started to change towards this kind of let's get people to stay.
Yeah. Well, it's part of that globalization. And look, right. Parts, car parts come from everywhere. People come from all over the place to work. Right. Sounds like Japan is trying to incorporate a lot of that into their culture as well. Kenji, we're going to have to leave it there. Great to talk to you as always. Thanks so much for joining us. And we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow, so until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.